So in this video, we're going to look at the use of function notation. Function notation, this notation here is saying that y equals a function of x. X would be the input, and the value, when you substitute x into the function, would give you y. We often use f. It doesn't have to be f though. You'll often see y equals g of x, or m of x, or p of x, or can be any letter at all there. So let's start off. We're just going to do question 6 and 7. We're skipping 8 and 9. He'll do those in another unit. So find each function value. This is the function we've been given. We've been given a function called f, and f of x equals 1 minus x squared. So whatever is our input here needs to be squared here. So this question 6 is saying, what is a function of 2? What does it equal? So 2 is going to be the input into this function here. So write out the function, 1 minus, what is our input? Look over here. Where there was an x, you replace it with a 2. So this gives us 1 minus 4. The answer is -3. Now pause your video and try number 7 on your own, then come back. So I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to write out the function. Our function is 1 minus whatever goes inside the parentheses squared. And what's inside the parentheses is our input. Our input goes in here. And our input this time, it's not just x, it's x plus 1. So think about the hats. We've got 1 minus, expand this. It's not going to be x squared plus 1 squared. Remember, you're going to have to FOIL this. So go off and do some foiling the side. You should get this. Now distribute that negative and clean it up. The way you want to write this out is the highest power of x first. So we're going to have negative x squared minus 2x. We've got minus 1 here and plus 1 there, so those cancel each other out, and that's your answer here. Next examples. On this one, we've been given two functions. Function of f of x equals the square root of x minus 4, and g of x is another function that equals 2 minus x. And we've been told to solve this for values of x for which f of x equals g of x. So this is our starting point. We know that f of x equals g of x, and think what we can replace f of x with. What can we replace g of x with? Now, if you want to, pause your video, go off and try that. I'm going to give you the answer in a couple of seconds. If you got it right, we'll just move on to the next screen. If not, then stick with me for the rest of this video. So pause your video, give it a try. The answer you should get on this is x equals 4, but there's a lot more to it than that. So let's go through solving this together. One note, when you are given the square root of x, if it's got nothing in front of it, you should only be considering the positive square root. If they wanted you to consider the negative square root, they'd put the negative in front of it. The only time you consider both the positive and the negative is if you were given something squared and you took the square roots of it yourself. Then you put the plus or minus in front of it. So we're going to solve this for x. I don't like the square root of x. I want to get rid of it. So I'm going to get rid of this by squaring it. But you can't square individual terms inside an equation. You can only square the whole of one side and square the whole of the other. So to square this, it wouldn't help me much at all. This would give me x squared minus 8 times the square root of x plus 16, which would be useless if I squared this side. But if I move that minus negative, subtract 4 to the other side, then I'll just have the square root of x on this side. So that's what I'm going to do here. Do the square root of x, add 4 to both sides, so this 2 becomes a 6, adding 4 to it. Now I can square both sides of the equation. The square root of x all squared is going to give me x. You work out what that is going to be. Make sure you do it on your own first. You should get this. Now we're still trying to solve for x. Look at what we've got here. We've got a quadratic equation. This is quadratic. Think of 2 ways. You name me 2 ways you could solve a quadratic equation. When you're solving quadratic, normally the first step is to make it equal to 0, and then you could either factor it or you could use a quadratic formula. Let's see if we can factor it. So first of all, we've got to make it equal 0. So I'm going to subtract x from this side. So this side is 0. This term here, if I subtract x from this will become negative 13x. But I'm going to write this x squared term first because I always like to write out polynomial expressions like this with the highest power of x first. So that's my first step, subtracting x from both sides. And I've got x squared minus 13x plus 36. Now I'll try and factor that. I use something called reverse FOIL. With reverse FOIL, the first thing you do is this first term x squared has obviously come from x times x in the first position. Then when you're doing reverse FOIL, the next thing you look at is the last term here, 36. Think of all your factors of 36. It could be 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9. 5 isn't a factor of 36. 6 and 6. Find the factor pair for 36 that sum together to be negative 13. So 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, this is going to work for me. 4 and 9 is 13. If they were both negative, if I use negative 4 and negative 9, the sum would be negative 13, and this term here at the end would be 36. So those go in there. Now, a lot of you will just flip what's in there and write down your solutions. I want you to get a little bit more into what you're doing there, because later on it's going to be important you understand why we do the step that we do next. What we're going to use now is something called the zero product rule. You've been using it for years. You might not have been calling it this, though. We have a product here. That's two factors are being multiplied together, and their product is 0. When you use the zero product rule, you know that if you're multiplying any number of things together and the answer is 0, then one of those factors you're multiplying together is 0. So here's the zero product rule. You're going to have 4 factors being multiplied together. If the answer is 0, you know that at least one of these factors must itself have equaled 0. So when we've got the zero product rule, when you've got products with a product of 0, back to the product of 0, you just get each factor and you set it equal to 0. So either x minus 4 equals 0 or x minus 9 equals 0. This one gives me x equals 4. This one gives me x equals 9. So we're done. Or are we? We're in precalculus. We're going to trip you up if you just stop there. What should you always do once you've found... Oops, sorry, my dogs are barking. In precalculus, you're always going to have to check to see if your solutions are valid. We've done good math here, but you can do great math and still end up with an answer that's extraneous. That means it doesn't actually make the original statement true. So look at our original statement. We've got to get our solutions. We'll try x equals 4 first, put that 4 in there, and check we actually have equality. Let's have a look. If x was 4, f of x would be the square root of 4 minus 4, which gives us negative 2. And our g of x, which is 2 minus x, this would be 2 minus 4, which also gives us minus 2. So that solution is good. Now you try it with x equals 9. Pause your video to see if this one's good. What you should have got is f of x gives you the square root of 9 minus 4, so it gives you 3 minus 4, which is negative 1. G of x would give you 2 minus 9, which gives you negative 7, and negative 1 does not equal negative 7. So that is an extraneous solution, and we have to cross it out. Our only answer here is x equals 4, but we want to see in your work is not complete if you haven't recognized that you did get this solution, but that it turned out to be extraneous. Let's very quickly recap this step here. We're going to use this several times in math this year. When you come across something that's quadratic, if you know what you're doing here, it's okay, you can skip on. It's just one more slide. Just reminding you of some basic algebra. Name the 2 most common methods for solving a quadratic equation. Well, first of all, you'd rearrange the quadratic equation till it equals 0. Then you can factor it and use the zero product rule, like we just showed you. Or as long as it equals 0, you can also use a quadratic formula. Do you remember what that is? X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We're not going to use that today. See if you can write it out. But remember, neither of these methods will work. They're totally and utterly invalid if what you're working with doesn't equal 0. The zero product rule only works if you've got factors the product of 0. The quadratic formula only works if your ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, end of this video.